My friends, what do you see here? Who do you think is winning this battle? Since my last video just a couple days ago, the situation went from bad to worse. And with a fresh cut like that, you know things are about to get serious. So Russian forces have secured the villages of Berkhiva, Yahidne. As you can see here, the Wagnerians are photobombing the sign at the entrance of Yahidne. And reports also mention that they captured most of Dubovo Vasilivka. Now, this is where the roller coaster starts. Wagner assault detachments broke through in the gap right in between these two villages and shoved the tip of their forces 4 kilometers deep into Ukrainian lines. Do you realize that they're now within 1,000 meters of Ukraine's last supply line going into Bakhmut? That's a 15-minute walk! Are we surprised? Take a look at my previous video. But if this line falls, it's open ground. It will be open bar for Wagner to capture the last remaining supply line going into Bakhmut and effectively encircle the garrison. Let's say that on this one, I shocked myself. The coming encirclement of Bakhmut is very real. And Ukrainian soldiers are not fools. They're fully aware of what's going on. Here are Russian-speaking Ukrainian soldiers. You can overhear a guy in the back say, "This is all the ammo we have left. What a complete shit show. Can't take it anymore." The one recording adds, "We're sitting here with the guys. We're surrounded on all sides. Just here, waiting." The first soldier in the back continues, "No worries. Everything is going to be alright. We're all going to go home and give everyone kisses and hugs." I don't know these guys, but such videos make it so personal that I really hope that these guys make it out alive. I also wanted to quickly talk about this Ukrainian counterattack that many commentators brought up. So here you can see a map of the Ukrainian breakthrough north of Bakhmut. The assault was led by the 4th Keyboard Armored Copium Brigade, which was then supported by the 1st Twitter Naval Bots Infantry Brigade, which broke through Russian lines. Yeah. Well, it was all fake. Complete fake news. Let's say that a lot of YouTubers had to delete their videos. Guess some people were really waiting for Steiner's counterattack.
Steiner konnte nicht genügend Kräfte für einen Angriff massieren. Der Angriff Steiner ist nicht erfolgt.
Welcome to History Legends, and here are the latest news of the Russo-Ukrainian war. Remember that if you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. As you know, just like with many other commentators, some of my Ukraine videos have been targeted with limited or no ads. So make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to all of you that have already helped. And welcome to the headquarters. Now all this mess happened because of the pivotal battle of Yahidne. So let's talk about what happened there. On the 20th of February, the first Wagner assault detachments reached north of Yahidne. Heavy battles were taking place. The next day, the Ukrainian army launched a counterattack and recaptured the area lost around Yahidne. On the 22nd of February, Ukrainians brought even more reinforcements to strengthen the defense. But the pressure by Wagnerian forces was too strong, and by the 23rd, the entire village came under Russian control. So all these so-called analysts that claim that Wagner lost 80% of its strength, that all their cannon fodder is gone.
Don't bullshit me. Bullshit.
With such casualty rates, how could they be still pushing so fast and so strong? This is a satellite picture from North Bakhmut. We can clearly see the axis of attack of the Russian military. They attacked from the north like this, from the east side, and then converged towards the south. They bombed their way through Ukrainian lines. Wagner assault formations advanced behind some sort of creeping barrage that was adjusted in real time with drones. Day and night they shelled Ukrainian positions. In this one, members of the 3rd Azov Brigade say, "It was horrific how much stuff was flying at us. Yesterday and today, it was almost getting into the dugouts." Problem is, this tactic that they used proved to be effective because the Russians now control the high ground. You can clearly see that there's a ridge line that they're going for, and there's barely any village or terrain feature that can stop them. In other words, with all these positions under their control, Wagner is looking over Bakhmut. From there, this is where things get messy. The orchestra can have a clear line of sight on anything trying to come in and out from the city. They can either fire some Cornet anti-tank missiles, or even positioned some tanks on the high ground to support these anti-tank crews. As you can imagine, this combination can be extremely deadly. Truth be told, the debacle may have already started. Here you can see a destroyed M113 APC, abandoned in the middle of the street. These Ukrainians are driving on that last road to bring supplies, and they have to slalom around burnt vehicles. Here, a Canadian Russell Senator APC that went through the oven. The warm weather makes it that the ground is not frozen anymore, but more like mushy. Many hope that this meteorological factor would halt the Russian advance, but it didn't. In fact, even Ukrainian BMPs now get stuck and have to be pulled out. And let's not even talk about these Ukrainian soldiers and their pickup truck that is completely bugged down. And at this point, even King Arthur wouldn't be able to pull them out. And those that cannot be saved are left behind. Honestly, I don't know what to think about all this. I've been talking about this battle for so long, and it's weird to see it happen in slow motion, like a slow grind, but inevitable. I wonder about all these Ukrainian soldiers sent right into the furnace. At this point, I think it's too late for withdrawal. Now to halt the enemy progression and to cover their own retreat, Ukrainians blew up the Bakhmut dam, which overflowed the river going north of the city. And here you can see the result of this action. The goal was to essentially create the same thing as these moats that you can find in medieval castles. However, by doing this, they essentially gave up entire control of the Stupki district to the Russians. Let's see how effective this tactic will be. If the Russians want to keep pushing from the north, they will have to cross this river, and they will face an important industrial area as well, which is very similar to the one in Azovstal in Mariupol. Now, if all this wasn't already terrible, meanwhile, Russian forces are also attacking south. We know this because Ukrainians posted a video with one of the tanks of the 93rd Brigade firing into houses held by Wagner, geolocated somewhere in that area. Thing is, by now Wagnerians are 500 meters away from that famous MiG statue at the western entrance of Bakhmut. How long until the orchestra takes selfies there? It will depend on Ukrainian soldiers. Once again, is it a surprise that the Russians are attacking to this area? It would also potentially allow the Russians to creep their way towards this urban settlement, using the cover of this little forested area, and physically cut the supplies going into Bakhmut. Since Wagner is an infantry-heavy battle corps, it just makes sense that they will try to infiltrate through forest, because this is one of the only areas that provides cover and camouflage for infantrymen. With this road cut, and this one as well, there remains only this tiny road going through Ivanisvke. As you can imagine, Ivanisvke, this small village here that has been historically irrelevant, has now become of strategic importance for Ukraine. According to Theory mapping, that would explain why Ukrainians have massed whatever remains of 5 brigades. If these are at 50% strength, this means there could be as many as 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers in this sector. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians deployed the remaining helicopters to secure that road near Ivanisvke to fend off Russian deep reconnaissance groups trying to cut off the road. And this video was interesting. Ukrainian soldiers recorded a Russian MTLB driving into their position. It was filled with explosives, like some sort of kamikaze vehicle. So we covered the north of the front, we covered the south of the front, now we have to cover the east. The Russians are now 500 meters away from downtown Bakhmut. As you can see, they're pushing in every direction. Ukrainians managed to hold the Russians in this residential sector for very long. But on the 22nd of February, these cracks turned into a breach. And by the 27th of February, the Russians were 300 meters away from the Bakhmutka river, separating Bakhmut in two. The Russians are about to create even more little cauldrons like they did many times before, some sort of mini encirclements, like we've seen in Krasnohora and Paraskovivka, like some sort of little bite-sized encirclements. From what I see on the map, it's just a matter of time before Ukrainians completely withdraw from the east bank of the river. And since most bridges have been blown up already, most of the heavy equipment will have to be left behind, and only the infantry will be able to make it to the safe zone. Well, turns out, according to the latest reports, as of February 28th, the Ukrainian command just gave the order for partial withdrawal from the east bank in order to establish new firing positions in the city center. One of such Ukrainian soldiers is this one. He says he's in Bakhmut. 3 days of constant street fighting. It's very difficult, and he does not wish anyone to be there. Now, despite Wagner's PR stunts, it's important to know that Wagner is not alone fighting this battle in Bakhmut. It's true that they're the ones that go to storm enemy positions, but Russian regulars are the ones actually taking hold of the terrain and making sure to halt Ukrainian counterattacks. For example, there are 2 Russian VDV airborne regiments tasked to protect the western flank of the encircling maneuver of Bakhmut. And like we saw in Kherson, Russian paratroopers are very good on the defensive. Now, despite the Russians and the Ukrainians being at a 1-to-1 ratio of forces, this allows Wagner to concentrate its assault formations at one point on one Schwerpunkt and have a local superiority at the point of attack, which explains their constant breakthroughs. Let's play a game. Today, you'll actually step into the headquarters, into the war room, as we'll explore 3 possibilities regarding the Battle of Bakhmut from the perspective of the attacker. Simply because he's the one that has the initiative. Let's see how he thinks and what the Ukrainians can do about it. Now, in a real war room, we would have a map with all our units, with their strength and losses, and estimations about enemy forces and their strength. But since this information is, as you can imagine, top secret, we'll have to use the terrain topography to do our analysis. Option 1, the tight ring. The goal of this maneuver would be to converge on Homove from both the north and the south and create a tight ring around Bakhmut. The 2 tips are currently 5 kilometers from each other, and remember what I said, never let the 2 tips touch. Now, how this attack could be done, the Russians could attack Bakhmutka to secure their right flank, and then they can essentially follow this rail embankment, just like they've done in the past few days, and it has been successful because there's only fields there. It's flat ground and there's little protection for defending forces, especially since we know that the attacker has a firepower advantage. Because the front is moving so fast, Ukrainian troops don't have the time to build proper defenses, like here where Ukrainian soldiers are left in the open with just a shovel to dig some cover. In the end, Ukrainian infantrymen have to expose themselves and fight from makeshift trenches that provide minimal cover. After that, the Russians can attempt to storm Homove and take capture of all these heights overlooking Bakhmut. For this maneuver to work, the attack would have to be supported from the south through this area with the make statue that would take Homove into some sort of pincer. What would be the Ukrainian response for option 1? There are 3 key positions Ukrainians have to hold at all costs. Here, here, and here. If Homove and Ivanisvke hold, this would allow supplies to continue going into Bakhmut, and Ukrainian troops to be rotated, even if they have to use small country roads filled with mud. On top of that, Ukrainian reserves in Ivanisvke could be able to counterattack this attack from the south. Option 2, a rush B. You know, this maneuver is very similar to dating. If you want girl A, you can also try to target her best friend B in order to get girl A jealous and for her to fall for you. In this maneuver, the objective would be to follow the rail embankment once again, capture Bakhmutka and Kalinina, but bypass Homove and simply go straight for the Donbass Canal in an attempt to storm Chasiv Yar before Ukrainians have time to seriously fortify the town and bring reinforcements there. The Russian attack could be supported by a renewed offensive west of Ivanisvke, across the TO504 road, where both forces would converge somewhere in these forests here. The advantage of this maneuver is that you target 2 girls with 1 pickup line, with the possibility to take both with the possibility to capture Bakhmut and Chasiv Yar. Essentially would recreate the Battle of Debaltseve, where the Ukrainians were caught in a cauldron, where in a moment of panic to avoid getting trapped, Ukrainian formations might just flee in disorder away from the cauldron. Essentially a route where everyone would just run for their life, with the Russians positioned on both flanks, with fire control over that last open area. You can imagine the final outcome, especially if Russian aircraft decide to heavily intervene and engage exposed Ukrainian columns. Now, what would be the Ukrainian response for option 2? Now, in this scenario, it's very important for the Ukrainians to hold the canal at all costs, because this is through this area that all the supplies have to cross over towards Bakhmut. More specifically, the Ukrainians have to heavily fortify and make sure to hold this settlement right here on the map. In this case, I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be very tough. But in theory, Ukrainians could still bring supplies and reinforcements towards Bakhmut, and perhaps even jab the flanks of the exposed advancing enemy columns. There's this video with dozens of British Mastiff armored vehicles being delivered to the Ukrainian armed forces, so such attacks could be done with this added mobility. Option 3. Brute force. The goal of this maneuver would be to bulldozer over any Ukrainian fortified position west of Bakhmut, storm Bakhmutka, Homove, but more importantly they could storm Ivanisvke. It's gonna be hard, it's a relatively big village, much bigger than all the ones Wagner has stormed in the past, apart from Soledar of course. As you can see, by doing so the aftermath would essentially encircle Bakhmut, with the benefit of having solid urban settlements to fend off Ukrainian counterattacks. A bit like Julius Caesar did at the Battle of Alesia, an inner ring to take Bakhmut, and an outer one to stop any relief force. What would be the Ukrainian response to option 3? In this scenario, the Ukraine solution is pretty straightforward. Hold Ivanisvke at all costs, but most importantly, push the enemy as far as possible from it. Now that I think about it, there's another scenario that's possible, but that would be the worst case scenario for Ukraine. So I hope they're prepared for it. In all these scenarios, we see how the most important position for Ukraine to hold is actually Ivanisvke. Now it all depends on how many forces the Russians have available, but essentially would be a combination of option 1 and 2. Essentially would require to take Homove and link up with a force from the south, and at the same time rush for Chasiv Yar, with a supporting action west of Ivanisvke that would essentially threaten Chasiv Yar, cut off Bakhmut from Chasiv Yar, and turn Ivanisvke into some sort of mini cauldron. Yeah, pretty scary. There's also this rumor spread by Prigozhin himself that the leopards are already in Chasiv Yar, so let's see what will be the impact of their arrival. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon and PayPal. The links are in the description.